first thing we do is need a timekeeper. So in about 1 hour from now, which is what, 2 o'clock? Oh no, 3 o'clock. Or say 2:45, if somebody can signal us when it's 2:45, because that way we want to give you a few minute break in between, so it's not just like 2 hours of us going on and on, okay? So any volunteers for a timekeeper? All right, Miss Clara back there. All right, thank you. All right, so welcome, guys. You will be hearing from LB and I this afternoon, learning from us about active meaningful engagement and sensory processing. So it will be riveting for sure. Up here to kind of emphasize our sensory channels, we have scented markers for everybody to take a gift away from us. Also, you have for your tasting pleasure a variety of candy around. And then also for those who have some serious tasting pleasure in the mints, there are some warheads. So as we go through our discussion today and learning today, we'll talk a little bit about those who really like that wow factor of the tasting senses, okay? So kind of what to expect today. So by the end of today's presentation, first, did everybody sign in and do the QR code? Okay, all right. So by the end of today, from this presentation, there'll be 3 things that you will have learned. You'll be able to identify at least 2 ways that a student can demonstrate active engagement in an activity. Identify 1 benefit of us meeting the sensory needs of our students. And the third is being able to identify 2 evidence-based practices for students on the autism spectrum and as well as visual impairments, okay? All right. All right. We have some interactive parts thanks to LB. So,
you can scan that code.
Thank you. See this.
Hey everybody, if you scan that code, it should pull up for you a Slido presentation, and you'll be able to input these answers anonymously, and we'll just kind of see what we know, see what we're thinking about.
Excellent.
So the question is, what comes to mind when you hear the words active engagement? And so far we have answer the question, reaching out, intentional responses from a student. Off to a great start. Participation. Someone corrected their typo. It's okay, it's Friday. Movement. Be an active listener. So participation has a couple there. Students being involved with activities, active listening, movement, optimized learning. Great.
Excellent.
Behavioral responses to the materials or presenter. Focus. Great. Good input so far.
All right. So then the next question that we want your participation in asks about how might a student demonstrate active engagement? And obviously it's going to vary because we have quite a varied population of students on our campus. So share whatever answers you would like. What would that look like? How would a student demonstrate active engagement? What might we see? Smiling, sitting quietly, making eye contact, joint attention. Mm-hmm. Interacting, yeah.
All right, so far we have a few folks saying eye contact, which of course would depend on the kids we're working with. Reaching out, head movements, verbal responses or utterances, raising hands, asking questions, reduced behaviors, vocalizing, exploring materials. Good range.
Excellent, yeah.
Can already see the variety of folks in the room. We're going to keep going, but I know some of you are still putting in some answers. Jumping up and down. That's a good one.
That's true, yep.
All right. What comes to mind when you hear the term sensory processing?
Wait time.
Yep, wait time, overwhelm, delayed reaction, thinking, hearing, different sensory channels.
You're fine, Miss Erica. What you need?
In your lap.
Candy conundrum.
So we have exploring, receiving, input, hearing, individual. Thank you so much for the participation so far. You are actively engaged. Look at that. Yeah, great. Good input. Again, no right and wrong right now. We're just kind of seeing what the lay of the land is here. Okay. How might a student indicate an unmet sensory need? All right. So we see here a lot of what we might call interfering behaviors, right? Behavior that interferes with learning. So tantrum, avoidance, biting, headbanging. Yeah. Acting out. Self-injury, might seek it out through movement, appearing agitated, shutting down, fidgeting. All right.
Very good.
Good.
So guys, part of that activity was, as we said, was to kind of just warm us up, get a baseline of what you guys already know, and hopefully as we go through this, not hopefully, as we go through this training, you'll hear a little bit more and learn a little bit more in depth of the what's, the whys, and some of the hows we can improve and help the students gain more from their time here at MSB. All right. So why do we need to talk about active engagement? Well, part of it is it's our responsibility as instructors to be providing the students with their most optimal learning. Part of that is we're under guidelines. The kids are entitled to a free, appropriate education. We have this discussion every year at students' IEPs about least restrictive environment, making sure that we can meet that student's needs as best as possible. So that's part of our role, but then also there's the personal and ethical responsibilities. When you're thinking about, oops, I keep hitting this. When you're thinking about why you're here, I'm sure all of us have our different whys, but I bet ultimately it's because of our students and we want to make a difference in their life. And the kids are entitled to the absolute best that we can give them. And then as far as our organization, we have a responsibility to make sure what we're instructing on is aligned to the standards and the outcomes that students need to learn, okay? Our bottom line is we want to improve the student's achievement, whatever that looks like. It doesn't matter if the student is functioning significantly below grade level or they're working toward their diploma. They're all entitled to that best educational opportunities as possible. All right. So why discuss the active engagement and sensory needs together? Do you think one impacts the other? Oh, a slideshow. I know you have a big cheat sheet up here, yes. Unmet sensory needs, and we've seen this in the past, there's lower engagement. The more we can have the students actively engaged by meeting their sensory needs, the more available they are for the learning, okay? If their sensory needs aren't met through the activity or through structure in their day, then they're going to figure out a way to get those needs met. And feel free to chime in whenever you want. Also, our autistic learners, they have sensory differences, and we need to, each one has their own nuances. We have to figure it out and meet them where they're at. Okay? So what is sensory processing? This is a nice little fancy picture of the brain because what sensory so we have how many senses? Who can name the senses? Oh. Well, you'll learn something today because there's 8 senses. So yeah, there's 5 senses in the sense of taste, touch, auditory. Thank you, olfactory. Auditory, I said, yeah. So there's 5 those, and then there's 3 others which we'll talk about in a little bit. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, okay? So what sensory processing is, through those senses, the taste, touch, smell, hearing, it is all information coming into our brain. Our brain then makes sense, if it's working right, of that information. So that's what sensory processing is. Our senses take in the information, our brain figures out what it's doing with it, okay? If something's not working right, then obviously there's going to be some problems. So then, again, just a fancy graphic of the different regions of the brain. The information coming in from our senses goes to different regions of our brain, specifically the cerebrum. That information is processed separately, so there's pieces that go to the information, pieces that go to certain portions of the brain, and then sometimes there's parts that have to come together so it all makes sense. So it's processed separately and it also collectively. So that's all that picture is, fancy picture of the brain in the different regions. Okay? So when we're talking about the senses and the information, what is our brain doing? What's it doing with that information? It's all coming in and it's doing what? Processing and integrating it, exactly. So if something's not working in that child's brain, or any of us, if our brain isn't working correctly, then more than likely that information is not going to be processed as well, or how we might think it would be. So combining and processing the sensory information from the different senses helps us to better understand kind of what's going on, and it also helps us better understand the environment, and we are able to better interact with that. So this is if everything is working well. So just think on a typical day, what we take in visually, what we take in auditorily, what we take in, and our brain, for the most part, is processing it and integrating it well. So when you're thinking about sensory processing, there are 3 important ways or examples of how the brain integrates it. So when you think of touch and vision, it's that eye-hand coordination. When you think about taste, usually you think about smell as well. So taste and smell kind of go hand in hand. And then you got vision and hearing. Both of those kind of pairs impact how well things are received. So in the next slide, think of it, you're at a baseball game, or you're playing any kind of sports. It's that eye-hand coordination. You have to be able to see. Your hand will then go and do whatever your brain is perceiving that it needs to do. So the eyes can't move freely in the sense, like, yes, they can move and look around like that, but your hand is the one that's taking that information. Your brain is taking that information. Oh, move your hand down to the right and catch that ball. So your hands are the use of your vision gives your hands the better way to respond to that. Then, same with smell. Taste and smell, they run hand in hand in the sense of if your smell is inhibited, or vice versa, your taste is inhibited, the other sense is not quite as able to pick up all the nuances. So on your tongue, you have the sense of taste, obviously, right? Everybody had some of the candy, the warheads, you got that sense of taste. Before you even tasted it, if you're going to go ahead and smell it. So through your nose, that stimulates your olfactory senses. When that ability to smell is impaired, your ability to taste is reduced. So they do work hand in hand. It's getting to be cold season, flu season. When you got a cold, can you taste as well or smell as well? I can't anyway. All right. So then, with the auditory and vision, when they're combined and able to work together, it allows us to understand better what's going on around us. If we hear something, we'll often look that way. And when we look toward the source, it's a concert and we're looking toward the source. What kind of information does that give us? It tells us where the sound's coming from, who's doing what. So the 2 senses literally run hand in hand. So when we're responding to the sensory information, think of this. It's a picture of a guy, he's getting a shot. Well, I'm sure we've all had them. We've all had the COVID shots, right? So what happens in that is your brain is responding to that sensory information. it can produce an immediate change in that person's behavior. The next time I go get a shot, I may not think it's going to be that memory is going to be lodged in my mind, and it's not a very pleasant recall. All right, so look, this is just a video, image of your brain, your spinal cord, your nerves. That really is the way the information travels. You take it in, your brain processes it, then it goes down, brain sends a signal down to the spinal cord along the nerves to the part of the body, including your muscles, which is one of the other 8 you'll hear about. And it includes your muscles to produce that immediate response. So everything is connected as far as what your senses are telling you, the processing in the brain, and our reactions. So when the information is remembered and stored in your memory, there you have your learning. We, with learning, acquire the new information and the processes of the information, and we remember the information in order to change our behavior in the future. And that's important to remember, especially as we work with our students, figuring out how we can help shape that. Learning is important because it helps the person change the behavior in the future. The simplest of many animals, many people can learn, have the ability to learn. Just a little side note, invertebrates rarely learn.
But they can.
They can. You're absolutely right. So learning is important because it improves how we function in our environment, and that's what we want for our students, is to create that optimal opportunity and inclusive of taking into account their sensory needs so they can be getting the biggest bang for their buck. So at the beginning I asked, it was not a trick question. Folks said there were 5 senses. You've got sight, taste, touch, sound, and smell. Those are my simple terms for them. But we also have internal senses, our vestibular system, our interoception, and also proprioception. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through. And then part of what we'll also talk about is with our students or with people in general, there's hyposensitivity, which means, anybody? Hypo, H-Y-P-O, under, and then hypersensitivity, which is over. And then we'll also then talk a little bit about in each area kind of some of the things we can do. Now there'll be a disclaimer on some of the slides like, yes, these are some of the activities that can be done, but please consult speech, OT, or PT. So you'll see that as we go through, okay? So as we talk about the sensory processing, there are 8 senses, as I said. So like I said, under, over, you guys did that beautifully. What we need to make sure we're taking into account with our kids is no one size fits all. It's individual profile, knowing your students. And on any given day, any given moment, that can fluctuate. They might be absolutely fine dealing with that noise yesterday, but today they just cannot deal with it. Okay? All right, so then with our students who are on the spectrum, they process, obviously this is no new, I don't think it's new news for anybody, they process atypically, for the most part. So having the sensory differences is more than just a different sensory experience. So our sensory input has 2 functions. It tells us what is out there in the world, and it helps us regulate the level of our arousal, okay? It alerts us, it raises our level of arousal, or it can calm us, so we can be calm, cool, and collected about it, or we might be heightened by it. If you're oversensitive, you're constantly going to be alerted. Everything. You're going to be like on the guard almost. If you're undersensitive, you're not going to be alerted enough. You're kind of almost passive, it could be. It could look like. Too much input, can make you appear angry, frustrated, panicky, weepy, any of those. Sorry guys, I'm dealing with a drippy nose. We've seen it with our kids. What happens if the coping mechanisms don't work? And a couple of things. I hear somebody mumbling it, but I can't hear it loud enough. Meltdown, I heard. Or what? What else? Yeah, it can have a behavior. What might that look like? It could be an escalation, or it could be a total, which I would kind of categorize in that meltdown category. Or they could have a total shutdown. We've seen kids across campus, no matter their level, like it could be they're going to just sit passively at their desk and you can ask them 50 questions and they're not answering come heck or high water. Or we see it in some of our kids who have more issues, and it might look like they're just laying on the floor, totally blocking you out. Same kind of thing. So all this applies to every level of our students. Okay. Oh, so this is just an example. It's a 2-minute little, I guess you can call it a video. It's kind of a diagram, but it's a video drawn of what it might feel like as far as with sensory overload. I had to think there for a minute. So just pretend you have sensory issues, and this is what it could be. There's lots of things going on, lots of noises. Pay attention to all that. That's fine. So guys, in that little video clip, are there any takeaways? Thoughts? Yes, Aaron.
Just for me, all that stuff was it's like everyday stuff. It's not like people going out of their way to make noise or, you know what I mean? It's just like everyday things that are happening anyway. Mm-hmm. And nobody's intending to do those things, but someone's processing is receiving that is very overwhelming.
Absolutely. Did everybody hear Aaron fine? Think about, guys, our students going into the cafeteria as an example, or even in the classroom, our older classrooms, the hum of the fluorescent lights. Some people may not even pick up on that. For some of our students, that is like a bomb going off. So, yes, I see somebody's hand in the back. Is that Ms. Rachel? Erica, okay.
Yeah. I know it's not exactly the same, but like kind of on the same note as this, like I feel like this is why we're always harping on wait time too, because there's so much going on, like just because we're not necessarily distracted by it or overstimulated by it, like our students are trying to process all of that, so like they might not have necessarily heard our direction right away, so maybe we have to repeat ourselves, but we want to give them that processing time as well.
Absolutely. Everybody heard Ms. Yes, Becky. Thank you, Erica.
Just outside, like Campbell with the bus circle and the buses coming in.
Great example.
And people calling for kids and say, come over here and everything. It's just overwhelming.
So, right, and that paints the picture, because the bus circle or the cafeteria is a congested mess. But even sometimes the smallest things that are happening at the bus circle are the biggest things for our kids to manage. So, excellent. Amy, last one.
It hits home with our because we have high intensity students, so sometimes, and it doesn't happen intentionally, but people come into the cottage and, hey, how are you doing? And their tones are kind of loud, and it's they mean it in a friendly manner, but they may not know that, hey, we have a kid around the corner that's kind of on the edge right now. So like having signs up or approaching situations that you're not really familiar with or don't know what's going on, approaching it with a softer volume, or asking is it okay to talk to this person? Keeping that in mind, because you see a lot of this in our cottage.
And that's a great point, I think, probably, Amy, for everybody's cottage, not only in the residential time, but the morning dressing time too as well. Folks are happy to be here at work and get to see the kids. And I know getting up in the morning is a challenge, but for our students, that's not the time that they want to hear loud voices, or it could set the tone. So just be aware of that. Yeah, very good. Okay, so this next one is a little bit different in the sense of it's a young lady who is 17 years old. She's on the autism spectrum. She's an autistic young lady, but she's nonverbal. So this is from her view of kind of what the world is going about. It's a short one. It's a 2-minute one too. Just kind of an awareness. Her name is Carly Fleischman, by the way, just so you know. You can look her up on the internet. She's done she's done a lot.
For coffee.
This is one of the earlier ones.
Hello, barista.
What do you guys want?
Skim soy latte. Darn, soy can't be skim.
Hot chocolate, orange juice.
No, Dad, I want coffee. Hot chocolate? Great.
So I was thinking of going to Sarah's dinner. Can you give me a ride?
Yeah, sure. Are you cool with taking your sister?
Yeah.
Wait, what? I have my own plan.
Okay, I'll see you tonight, okay?
How can I help?
And you can look her up on the internet. She did an interview with, he's a late night host show, Stephen Colbert. And it's funny, she actually, the thing that I really liked about that is it never underestimate what our students who are nonverbal are taking in, or what they might be able to give you back once they get the right communication device in hand. Because later on when you see her doing, if you do take the opportunity to look her up on the interview, she does an interview with Stephen Colbert that is her own questions, got a great sense of humor. I felt that was important. It brought that communication piece in, but also illustrated that from her, in her mind, kind of like my unmet needs. I don't want hot chocolate, I want coffee, or I don't want skim milk, I don't want to go with my sister to this thing. But again, it illustrated the piece of never underestimate, and if you do look her up, you'll see what a difference the communication device makes for her. Okay, so we, as instructors, have a lot to consider. So some ways that we can possibly help some of our students who have some of these sensory issues. So specifically for touch, if they're undersensitive, hyposensitive, they're going to have a decreased awareness of that they're being touched. They may have decreased awareness of dirty hands, dirty face, drooling, any of that. They might be unaware. If they're oversensitive, what you may see is that touch overall is painful. What you think might be great to give that student a pat on the back, a high five, a hug, well, a side hug, is painful for them. So never assume what we think is soothing. It might not be soothing for a student who has got issues with touch. Now, how can we help that? If the student is undersensitive, and guys, again, these are just ideas. Always consult OT, PT, or OT specifically for touch. But with undersensitive kids, we can look at using Play-Doh, Theraputty. I know a number of our kids have that, Discovery Putty. Different cutting activities, fidget toys. I think we need to buy market on the fidgets for sure. Work on balance, weight-bearing activities. Weighted pencils. A number of our students have adapted pencils, whether it's weighted or because of the grip they have. If the student has oversensitivity to touch, you want to forewarn them before you do that hug, or you may want to ask their permission before, or you not might. You want to ask their permission. Is it okay I give you a pat on the back? You're doing such a great job. You don't want to force the student to participate in anything that's messy. I know in years past, it's like, oh, well, we got to help them get through this sensitivity. You're really causing issues with that. It might even be traumatic for them, for real. And it is okay, like in anywhere, whether it's playing with Play-Doh, playing in an activity, doing a paint activity, if the student wants to wear gloves. Again, pick your battles. If I don't want my hands messy, I'm going to wear gloves. We certainly want to afford that same opportunity to our students. And always approach the student from the front, okay? Other things to consider as far as with touch. In the morning, again, going back to the morning routine, I know sometimes we just want to, let's rock and roll, help the kids get out, come here. Have them brush their own hand. When you're talking their personal space, you really want to be making sure that you're asking, getting their permission, but also trying to encourage them to do it on their own. You don't want to be forcing them in there, especially in their own personal space. Try different toothbrushes and toothpaste. And again, right underneath here where it says how to help, OT is a great resource. Don't kind of go out on your own and buy 5 toothbrushes and try to use it. Get some guidance from the professionals on this, okay? We had a student, and Becky remembers him well. The tags on his clothes would drive him bananas, or if it was that scratchy kind of nylon stuff. So you just need to be aware. There are so many different things with touch that may be aversive to our students. And also think about firm pressure rather than that light, tickly touch. So the other, another sense we talked about was taste. So what might that look like? So if the student is undersensitive, they might always be putting things in their mouth. They're seeking out that sensory input. Chewing on their clothes, chewing on their hair, their fingers. At meal times, you might see overstuffing. Who took some of the warheads? Yeah, they might like that extreme flavor, you know. Also, some of our kids like lots of condiments on their food. Again, it's giving them that low, they want more input because they're low, they have the undertaste kind of thing. They might taste, lick, smell everything before they, even if it's non-food items, and they might have that excessive drooling. If the student is oversensitive, they can gag easily. Now again, these are general. Some of our students may not, it's not a check off like, oh, yep, check, 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 check. They've got them all, so that means that these are really some, they don't have to meet every single of these criteria. It's just some of the things they might exhibit. They might have difficulty with food textures. They might be fussy eaters, or in our case, I think we call them picky eaters. And they might not like having their teeth brushed just because it's a very sensitive area. How can we help? So if the student is hypo or undersensitive, some of the jewelry, and they've come a long way with this. Some of them look like crystals, but they're like Legos, but they're shaped, they're rubbery kind of Legos, or like I don't know what the actual geometric shape of them are, but they look like crystal, like a necklace you might wear. They look like, or they have some that look like Oreo cookies. There's quite a variety. It's no longer just the kind of ugly old dog toys that they used to have. Also encouraging blowing games, and I know some of our students in the past have had specific activities prescribed to them to help with this. Crunchy foods, again, make sure you're checking with speech and all. Don't be giving students pretzels if they're on the, I don't remember the numbers, but on the mushy kind of diet. And then if they are using that chore, you can redirect them to using that during appropriate times. All right. So now, if they're oversensitive with the taste, how to help? Well, we can work on some oral stimulation, and some of the folks we used to use Nook brushes and all that to kind of help with that, kind of reduce, encourage that exploration of mouth fidgets. Sensory activities that encourage food play, that's always a lot of fun. Sometimes, and it depends on from student to student, the calming music during mealtime might help. It may not, but again, you need to know your personal student and what helps them. Also, sometimes like a deep pressure massage before mealtimes can help. It helps ground them. But again, that's individualized. And avoid presenting all the food at once. I know, and I'm talking 30 years ago, sometimes in the cafeteria, when the kids were on pureed diets, everything was swirled together. It's like, you can't tell what's potato. They might like the potato, but they don't like the peas because it's all mushed together. So avoid doing that. All right, so how can we help with the tasting of foods? Sorry, my nose is dripping, guys. Do not remove the preferred foods. Hunger will not be a driving factor for change, and that's really kind of against any kind of thing we want to be doing. And don't hide the food in preferred foods. Again, what used to be a preferred food, once they taste that yucky food behind it, they're not going to taste that yummy food again. Students who are like a picky eater or that, they might already be on a nutritionally compromised situation, so you don't want to make food a more aversive situation for them. Parents, or even here we have a nutritional clinic, seek that guidance, refer them for that. Be persistent. Even if the student doesn't like the food the first time, now I'm not saying force, but reintroduce it again. So I'm thinking of one student in one of our classrooms. Yep, he has to bring it to his mouth 2 times, not necessarily eat it. He feels the food, and then he puts it down, and then he gets his next item. So it's about keep trying, even if he rejects it once, but again, it's not forcing. And the motivator has to be rewards need to be rewarding, and the motivators have, why am I going to try this food? Well, we want to build in the rewards and the motivators to try to get them pumped to do it. All right. So are distractions okay while they're at the meal table or snack or whatever? Sure, if it helps them get through the process and do what they need to do. Again, pick and choose your battles. If it's okay for them to have fidgets, music, whatever, as long as they're still able to get done what they need to get done. Sometimes some of the supports we can have in place are visual supports for the student. Again, continue with food activities, food-related activities, and speech can also be a great consult for this. Break down, don't overwhelm the student with 5 different foods to try. Break it down into small steps, and then even when you're presenting it to the student, it needs to be a piece at a time on their plate until they don't overwhelm them with 5 different things on their tray. Also, you can use the special interests of the student. Sometimes it might be, you can eat off this Captain Marvel plate, or things like that. So you need to really be creative. Some of the simplest things can really help the student overcome this. All right, and encourage them to handle and prepare their food. I was going to say play with their food, but I changed that word. All righty. So then we're going to talk about smell, and obviously my smell is compromised because I have a little bit of a cold. But what might that sensitivity look like? So if they're under-sensitive, they might crave some smells, and some of those smells may not be something you or I would prefer to smell. Bleach might be one that they might be drawn to. Gasoline is another one. They tend not to identify what safe smells are, like I mentioned, bleach, but they go for those stronger smells. And some students who are under-sensitive might also do smearing. So if they're oversensitive with smell, again, they might gag. or really get sick when they encounter some certain smells. They might become distracted by smells. I was just going to go off on a side note, but I stopped myself. And they might struggle at mealtimes because of the smells. Who walks past the cafeteria in the morning or lunch, and I haven't been there past dinner, but you can smell like, oh, that lunch really smells good. Or sometimes it's like, ooh, that lunch really smells good. So sometimes the kids are ready or not for it. So the other thing with smell, everybody please be aware of the cologne, perfume, anything that you are wearing. It, again, because of the sensitivity, what you might think is mild comes across as like, wow, a wave of, whew. So be aware. The students with sensitivities don't just live in classroom A, classroom B. They are all throughout the school. So you really need to be aware of all of this that we're talking about. It doesn't pertain to just one or two classrooms. Sorry. All right. So then if you're undersensitive with smell, some of the ways that we can help are talking about appropriate ways to introduce the smells. Scented lotions, scented candles, smelling them. We can't burn candles. Providing regular activities that have the smell in the smell element. Thank you very much. Scented Play-Doh.
Everything all right?
Yeah, I'm dripping my nose. No, it's my nose, LB. It's my nose. No, it's my nose. Who's the timekeeper? It's my nose.
34.
Okay. Then provide activities that stimulate the olfactory senses, the smelling. Playing in grass, as long as they're not allergic. And also like scratch and sniff stickers. Okay. They have books that are those scratch and sniff as well. You have scented markers. Anyone chooses to take them, then you can use those as well. All right. Then if the student is oversensitive, fragrance-free cleaning. I already talked about perfume, so I'm not going to harp on that. But even in the dorm, if they go shopping with their residential program and they choose to buy lavender-scented soap, you need to be aware that if they've got some sensitivities, you want to encourage them to buy scent-free toiletries. Keep the rooms well ventilated, which we have great systems now. So I'm sitting here covering my nose with a tissue, not because of smell, but because it's dripping. Don't automatically think putting on a mask is going to be what you want to do for a student. You want to make sure, A, you've got their permission, and B, they can manage taking it off by themselves. You don't want to be putting a mask on a student if they cannot take it off by themselves and you don't have their permission. But that's certainly one way that you can help them manage the smell if there's something that's bothering them in the environment. And then introduce the smells slowly and in a fun way. We always want to work at the kids' pace. We can help the students overcome some of this, or manage it better, or deal with it better. But we always want to be working at where they're at, meeting them where they're at. All right. So now onto the lovely area of auditory. So if the student is undersensitive, hyposensitive to sound, they may appear they're not hearing you. Or it might be selective hearing. They may not notice sounds. They might create sounds of their own, the humming, or they have some preferred loud sounds, banging on tables, banging on doors. Or they may not be noticing that they are yelling or being very loud. So keep that in mind as you're working with some of your students. Now, if they're oversensitive, they still could appear like they're not listening to you. So that falls under both categories. So you really you have to tease out if that's the one factor, then be looking for some of the other factors and trying to figure it out. Some of those kids who are hypersensitive are very sensitive to sounds. Like the video, the earlier video, the first one. That dripping of the water, that tapping of the pencil may be the only thing they're hearing out of a whole world of the classroom. And they have an inability to regulate what's important to listen to. So every sound, kind of like for me, like sometimes I can pay attention to the littlest thing, then that's not at all what I need to be paying attention to. Same with the auditory issues. If the student has, if they're hypersensitive, they might be listening to something that is not the major factor that they should be. Instead of hearing what the person's talking about, they're listening to the click, click, click. They may also plug their ears. So how can we help? Well, when you're talking to the student, stand beside, because you'll be right next to their ears. You can be closer to the source where they're hearing. Also use visual support with your instruction. How many of our kids have checklists that help them visually manage, or their schedules, if they've got vision, help them manage as you're explaining? Again, the more you can anchor the activity in a variety of senses, the more likely our students are going to be able to learn it. And this goes back to what Miss Erica said, allow a longer time to respond when you're asking questions. They may need that extra processing time. And then break the complicated directions down into smaller chunks. You guys are expert at it. We've done that for a long time. Then if they're oversensitive, noise canceling headphones, we have those, or the foam earplugs, they help. Still allows the sound to get through if you're talking to them, but it also can block out a lot of that ambient sound. Pre-warning of noise, there's a few students that we let the classrooms know when there's going to be a fire drill, because that can be shattering of the day. It is okay for the students to listen to music while carrying out an activity. I say that, but pause, especially if it's orientation and mobility. You'd want to consult with them, because sometimes that music can be interfering and you don't want them trying to cross a road when they're listening to music at the same time. So always seek that professional input. Give them access to the quiet spaces and limit the excessive noise when possible. Some of them are very common sense.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yep, sure.
Just a quick caveat with headphones, but also taste and smell, really cleaning. These are great tools to have when you have incredible resources at MSB these days. But before you try sensory or noise-reducing headphones, or modify any diets, or think, hey, I have a great idea to try during mealtime, we're so lucky to have speech, OT, PT, O&M, like all the disciplines that we have here on campus to help make those decisions. It's not that your input would not be valid, it's actually super valid, but we can inadvertently create some disordered eating inadvertently. We can also create sensitizing to headphones. And there's a cost benefit to all of these things from a social perspective for people. So important to get the family's input, the students' input as much as possible, and the input from all the professionals on campus, so that we don't find ourselves in a position where we're trying to undo something. Hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, so then vision, what does undersensitive to visual input? So they might stare at spinning objects. They also might spin their own bodies to gain the visual feedback. Sometimes you'll also see students do some eye pressing, that kind of thing. Then what does oversensitivity mean? They're going to look, they may look away from you. They're going to withdraw from the light sources. They're going to struggle with eye contact. They may miss visual cues. This is hard, because with our students with visual impairments, many of them might miss visual cues, but again, it's a menu of items. Some of our kids, because of the visual sensitivities, will tilt their head. Some of it might be an eye condition, so again, you got to know your student. And then the misjudging of some spatial awareness. So they might bump into things, but again, that's a menu, not all-inclusive or exclusive, okay? So what does undersensitivity look like? So they're gonna, we wanna make sure how can we help? So we're gonna need to look to make sure we're setting up some activities that allow visual stimulation or promote visual stimulation. We wanna make sure we're doing that, because that can really heighten the student's ability to perform throughout the day. They're more alert, they're more awake. You wanna make sure we've got them in the best state possible for that learning. Also, you can use visuals where it's appropriate for our kids to help gain their attention. If they're oversensitive, what we want to make sure we make sure we don't have a myriad of visual clutter. It might look beautiful in the classroom or in the residence, but you want to take into account what your students' ability to manage, because that visual clutter can be overwhelming. Make sure things are clearly labeled. This isn't news to you guys. You know this. Sometimes when we're working with the kids who are oversensitive, you might want to do exaggerated facial expressions, and then work on throwing and catching activities if it's appropriate. That does help too.
5 minutes until the break.
All right.
Hit anything in particular?
Say it again.
Do you want to get toward anything in particular?
No, I'll just highlight a little one. Okay. So guys, LB and I knew we had more information than we were going to get through. So we're going to I'm going to skip around a little, give you highlights as far as like proprioception. Folks know that's all about your muscles, tendons, ligaments, and joints. That's your internal vestibular part, or muscles, your receptor. So when your body detects kind of how it controls the force and the pressure, it helps us feel grounded. So when you think of proprioception, it's all about feeling grounded in where you are in space. Okay? And we can send you the PowerPoint too, so don't think that just because we probably aren't going to be able to cover everything, we'll still have it at your disposal. But there's some great ideas as far as what that might look like, the proprioception sensitivity. They might crave that rough and tumble play. They like to be out running and active. They may do rocking back and forth, any of that. And then there's some suggestions, which our OT and PT are great about. Some of our kids have some of this already, like the wobble seats on their chairs, or the cushions in their chairs that help them give that input. Okay. Vestibular is all about it comes from our inner ear, and it's about the position, direction, and the movement of your head. So it helps with your body in space, posture, and your muscle tone. It also is that stable visual field. Works with our bilateral coordination.
That was at 2:45.
Thanks, Beck. And it's all about that gravitational awareness. I appreciate that, Beck. Yep. Some of our kids who are thrill seekers, who want that sense of danger. I can think of a student who would climb on years ago, before we had this nice new playground, we had some monkey bars out there, and he would climb on the top and try to walk and crawl across the top. They're those thrill seekers. They want that input very much. And they enjoy being upside down. All right. So I did want to just, one last thing. I wanted to, because I learned something as we were getting ready for this. So I didn't really have a firm understanding like what interoception senses were. Well, that's all about how we feel inside, like our sense of well-being, but also like, am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I whatever? But it's that kind of inner feeling that sometimes we have to help teach our kids about. They don't necessarily, we, through our processing and all, have learned when I'm tired, when my eyes are heavy, I feel tired. And when my stomach growls, I'm hungry. That's what this is all about. Also with the toileting piece as well, the students, they don't feel the sensations that they should. So that's where, with this the interception part, that's where we really might have to spend a lot of time to help our kids understand what those feelings are. So that's the biggest takeaway from that part.
Yeah.
All right, should we pause, Miss Becky, now?
My butt says yes.
All right, well, you know what? That's perfect, because we'll come back and we can do some Slido activities.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much for your punctuality and your attention so far. We know that because there's so many disciplines in the room, a lot of this is review for some of you, but hopefully you can take just a piece with you today when you go. And we're lucky to have so much expertise here on campus. So just to kind of wrap up what we just talked about, meeting sensory needs. Thank you if you've already input your answers here. So what is one way you could help a learner who is hypo or hypersensitive or over or understimulated? Provide warheads at all meetings. That was Aaron Stanley. I have no doubt. No cologne. That was actually, a couple people mentioned that. So, and that brings up difficult conversations. So we might work with folks who are inadvertently wearing strong scents, and as you know, you acclimate to your own stuff, right? So like you might not know that it's a stronger smell than what might work. So that's the time when we can call each other in, right? Not calling out, calling in, and say, hey, I'm going to be direct with you. Your cologne's really strong for the school environment. It's awesome, but I think it might be a little bit much for our kids. Can you take it down a notch? And hopefully you're working with folks you're comfortable with enough to say that. And even if it is uncomfortable, it's still worth it if it's in the interest of the kids. So can't go wrong if it's in the interest of the kids. So great, manage the environment, less light, speak softly. Keep in mind, soft voices, I know for me, I really struggle with whispering sounds. That's actually very difficult for me. So my preference might be something a little bit different. So just know your kid. Less lights, smell all the markers, great job. Okay, so how does this relate to meaningful engagement? So the second half is going to go more into instructional strategies that can be employed in classrooms, but also throughout life. But you can't have meaningful engagement and learning occurring if those basic sensory needs are not met. That's part of the whole individual. So why talk about this? Well, regardless of sensory needs, all of our students benefit from active engagement. We benefit from active engagement. More experiences help anchor learning. And if we bring instruction to life in a way that's meaningful for our kids, there's more chance of retention and actual learning taking place. What we don't want to do is stand in front of kids and talk like we are at you for 2 hours. The way you learn is not, the way any of us learn is not just by sitting and listening. We need to be actively involved. Our kids, by virtue of being here, already have at least one sensory channel that is not operating in a typical way. And many of our kids have more than one. A lot of our kids have more than one. So we have to kind of troubleshoot that and account for that. All kids, no matter how complex their disability, can learn. Learning is not behavioral. I'm sorry, learning is, oh my God. What's my job? Learning is behavioral.
That was a quiz.
That was a quiz, yeah. Yeah, right. It's over. Learning is behavioral, I'm sorry. When students are not learning, that's an indication that something is going wrong in the environment and not within that student, which is a little bit humbling to think about. But the reason I'm up here talking to you is because although behavior analysts in a school setting are typically looked at as the people that reduce challenging behavior, interfering behavior, our science is just the science of learning. So you learn to replace challenging behavior. But one thing we can help with in our discipline is also assisting with learning. So if there is, no trend in the acquisition of a skill, we can come in and help with that. We can help assess what's going on. How can we get this acquisition rate up higher? How can we help the student learn a little bit better? All right. First things first, evidence-based instruction. Here are just some general resources that you might want to check out. And I think this presentation, thank you, Erin, again, I think is available through Paylocity. So if you want to go in there and poke around, these are all good sound places to get information about how to teach kids with disabilities, specifically autism. But the National Center on Intensive Intervention, the What Works Clearinghouse, National Professional Development Center, these are all great places to get information. So here's another participation chance for you. What do you think evidence-based practices means? No right or wrong answer, we're just seeing what you know.
Maybe like things that have been tried or practiced and where there's evidence that it had a positive and or negative result.
Great. Yeah, feel free to shout out. You don't have to use Slido if that's not your thing. So tested and statistically proven results based on research, backed by data, tried and vetted methods instead of guesses. Wow, nice job. A lot of prior knowledge in the room. Fantastic. This is good. This tells me I can maybe scoot through this next part a little bit quicker. You are right. Good work. Why do you think using these practices is important? Proven success?
Routines are good for our kids.
Routines are good for our kids. Yeah, efficiency, right? Why reinvent the wheel? Helps with independence, not reinventing the wheel. Yep. In line with that, also not wasting valuable time, right? Our kids are already at a deficit coming to us. We do not want to waste their time. We want to use their time wisely. Great. Okay, how about this one? Which of the following are evidence-based practices, EBPs, for students with autism? And you might select more than one, you might not. We did a much longer intensive training in the summer when we were building our group of classrooms, and this was, just so you know, this second half of this presentation was an 8-hour training, so it's a lot to pack in, but your responses are very in line with what we saw with our folks too. All right, so most people think direct instruction, some people think behavioral momentum intervention, music-mediated intervention, gluten-free diet, some people think hippotherapy. All right. Thank you for your participation. Okay, so you already kind of answered this. So what do we mean when we say evidence-based practices? It's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot, and sometimes we tune out when we hear words and terms like this, right, in education, but they're actually extremely important. So what are they? Tried and true teaching practices, so you guys said that verbatim, supported by intensive, rigorous, high standards research. So it's not a one and done. It's not, a case study. It's not one student does well with it. It's replicated. It's done scientifically. Replicated with positive outcomes. Meaningfully improve student outcomes. So that means in a measurable way. And evidence-based practices are effective in any classroom. So the same practices can be in play in our classrooms with our most complex kids as can be employed in our diploma-seeking classrooms. It's the same principles. The same principles are underpinning the instruction. It just might look a little bit different in practice. What they're not are subjective. So it can't be what you believe works. Now you're going to determine which practices to use with your kids, whether you're in a classroom, in a cottage, in the community, in an adult placement. You're going to decide what to use based on that student's or that individual's interests, their performance, what works for them, but it should always be based in the science. Case studies, not sufficient to be called an evidence-based practice. Our kids are so complex that, in all honesty, there's a lack of research, especially for blind kids and especially for multiply disabled kids in terms of what works. So you have to just kind of take that with a grain of salt, but we still have some information available to us. You'll hear people often talk about best practice. Best practice says this, best practice is this. That's not the same as evidence-based practice. It could still be best practice at MSB. It could still be what we require in our classrooms here, but that's not the same as an evidence-based instructional practice. So why are these important? Or who are they important for? The students, right? Individuals with autism or autistic individuals and their families. Carol and I switch between our language a lot because we try to be sensitive to everybody we're talking to, but we're aware that we do that, just FYI. Important to us to do a good job, right? Important to researchers so they know what to research and where the money comes from to pay for that research. Advocacy groups, policymakers, and healthcare providers and insurance companies. Therapies outside of school are often paid for through insurance-based service or insurance companies. And so they want to see treatment goals typically tied to some type of evidence-based practice. All right, So, here's how it works. There's research. Research occurs, goes into a peer-reviewed journal, systematic reviews, identification of the practices, but most importantly, it has to be translated so that people can actually use it. So people aren't going to pick up a psychological journal and look at all the graphs when they're in the middle of teaching Braille. It needs to be translated into user-friendly language. And then there's like those last 3 steps are kind of in a cycle. So there's professional development, so training, right? Training trainers so people know how to do what they're doing. And then the application to that end user, the consumer, the kid, and their family. That's the process things go through. So it's a pretty rigorous process. And typically, about every 4 to 5 years, these practices are updated based on research. And some fall out of favor based on the science that comes out of it. And some are suddenly included that weren't included before because then there's enough research behind it. So here's the criteria. There have to be at least 2 studies, well-designed studies, conducted, or at least 5 single case studies, or a combo. So it's no small thing. I know you can't read this, it's very tiny. Sorry about that. But this is just meant to show you that things do change over time. You've probably heard the saying, science is self-correcting. Things should change over time. You do the best with what you know. When you know better, you do better. That's posted everywhere around our offices. You got to keep up with it. And it's hard to keep up with it when you're in direct service, when you're working directly with kids. But that's where hopefully institutions have a way to kind of interpret this and bring it to you so that you know how to use it. All right, we're not going to read through all these, but some of these hopefully look familiar to you. So antecedent-based interventions. Antecedent is just a fancy word for, what happened before. Ante, right? What happened before? Behavioral momentum is an evidence-based practice. Time delay, that means waiting to prompt. Social narratives, different from social stories. Social stories are not an evidence-based practice, but social narratives are. Happy to talk to you about the difference, not today, if you're interested. Prompting, reinforcement, modeling, music-mediated intervention. So a lot of stuff that you probably see and do all the time, and you might just not know that you are using an evidence-based practice, but good on you if you are, because I know that you're all doing a lot of this stuff. So how do we do this when the rubber meets the road, when we actually are teaching our students? One example of using an evidence-based practice to increase engagement would be what's called direct instruction or explicit instruction. And that's just I do, we do, you do, right? Most of us, if we went to any type of typical group school, every time we came to class, there was some kind of review of what we did last time, right? Some kind of check-in of our prior knowledge. Then the teacher modeled something for us. If you were in math, the teacher probably modeled for you some addition problem, used manipulative, showed you how to count it out. Then you tried it together. That's the we do, right? Or the guided practice. And then, if your teacher was doing a good job, you would have tried it on your own at some point or with less support. So independent practice, there should be a little asterisk there, as independent as possible. But basically, it's a scaffolded thing where you're shown how to do something. We might call that errorless learning. That might be a version of that, right? There's no mistakes occurring. You're kind of seeing the right way to do it. Then you practice it with the support of your instructional staff. Then you try it on your own. So it happens, again, like we said, it can happen in any classroom. This is what should happen in any classroom. There should be an example to follow. You should get to try it on your own. And there should always be kind of a wrap-up and a check-in at the end. So here's an example, very brief, of what we're talking about. Direct instruction. We're not going to watch the whole thing.
that there is a need, and the research supports the need for effective research-based direct instruction. It has the I do piece for teacher modeling, the we do or the guided practice, and lastly the you do for the independent practice. As a teacher, the direct instruction model is critical to ensuring that your kids get it. It's student-centered instruction, but it's teacher carefully delivered and designed instruction.
Our essential question today is, what is a name collection?
I'm going to think aloud on what I need you to be able to do, but not the what.
The I do component, the teacher-directed piece, is brief, not lengthy.
By the time you leave here, hopefully you have your questions answered.
I do is the opportunity for teachers to demonstrate what it is that they want students to know.
A concrete example of exactly what students will need to know and be able to do.
Maybe it would help if I showed you what that looks like with a partner.
Direct instruction ensures that the teacher provides a model, that the teacher then provides supports and structure.
We guided them through, they were allowed to volunteer, but we were doing the problem, we modeled the problem for them.
Remember our equation, A equals P times B. We walked them through the problem, we practiced the problem with them, we made sure they understood the problem.
Hand up this time, how do I get X alone? How many do we have over here?
So this is the we do, right? The model's been given, now they're practicing together.
5, 6. I find that the more modeling I do, the less chance for error when we are practicing and learning it with a partner later.
During the we do phase of direct instruction, the teacher works collaboratively with the students. We do is the opportunity for guided practice, where the teachers work with the students together.
What I would like a volunteer to do is to come up here and take these 6 counters and put them into 2 different groups for me. Corby, go ahead.
The teacher
I want to make sure we get through as much as we can, so I'm not going to show you the you do, but the you do would just be the student trying on their own. And this presentation you can access, so if you want to watch the whole video, you can. So watching this video, 15 years ago, working with the kind of kids that we work with over in our building, who a lot of you work with or have worked with, I would have looked at this video and been like, how on earth am I supposed to be doing that with my kids? Well, I'm here to tell you, you can do it. You should do it. It just looks a little bit different. So with a deafblind student, you know, with interfering behavior, you might be running a behavior plan alongside this, but the I do piece, the modeling piece, might be hand under hand. It might be an errorless task, meaning the student can't make a mistake. You're teaching them what to do with the materials. The we do might be you fade out your prompting a little bit. And the you do might be you give them the task and see how they do. There might not be any spoken instruction. It might be an adaptive task. It might be a life skills task. You know, it might be a showering routine. The same principle applies. You're basically providing the model so that no mistakes are made, so that you don't have to go back and fix and unteach and create frustration. Ooh. Okay, now we're getting more behavioral. Behavior, a lot of you have heard me say this before, behavior is anything an organism or a human being does. So we typically, in real life, use the word behavior to mean something bad. There's like a negative connotation. He's having behaviors, he's in a behavior. Behavior is truly anything you do. Sitting in your chair right now is behavioral. Chewing gum is behavioral. Smelling one of these markers is behavioral. Being on your phone is behavioral. So everything you're doing, good, bad, indifferent, that's all behavior. Learning is behavioral. Behavioral momentum is just exactly what it says. And it's a really great practice to use in your classroom. So alongside direct instruction or explicit instruction, the I do, we do, you do, behavioral momentum can be a huge help for kids who have interfering behavior, but also for all kids, just to get some momentum going, get some confidence going. I'm going to show you this video. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but basically it's in the research, 2 to 5 high probability tasks. What that means are just easy things. Things the learner has a high probability of completing correctly. They're fast, so 2 to 5 quick things, and then the harder thing. So with little kids, sometimes this looks like, oh, let's stomp our feet, let's clap our hands, great job. Can you put your toys away? I wouldn't say can you, because no is a correct answer to that. But, you know, hopefully you've also taught your learner to say no. But yeah, so it could be something quick and easy, right? For an older learner who's in a diploma-seeking classroom, it might be a couple mastered math problems and then something more challenging. And you could bookend it with something a little bit easier. But it keeps things that have been learned in the past fresh, right? Keeps retention happening. But it also provides behavioral momentum. You're less likely to see interfering behavior, more likely to see what we would call compliance with a task, but also just completion of a task and higher accuracy. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck and you're really not losing any instructional time.
Have you ever made a to-do list and started with the easiest task before you tackled your harder to-dos? That's behavioral momentum. When we are able to check a few easy things off quickly, that makes us more likely to complete the harder tasks on our list. In essence, behavioral momentum is a prevention strategy that includes prompting students to engage in tasks that have a higher probability of completion prior to tasks that have a lower probability of completion. Put simply, we make easy, quick requests of our students before we ask them to do something more difficult or less preferred. We use this behavioral strategy to assist students with initiating tasks and following directions, which builds opportunities for students to experience success. You might say it starts the ball rolling. It is especially helpful for students who use problem behavior to avoid demands, but can also be useful for any student or as a class-wide strategy. Research shows that this strategy is effective for all students, including those who have behavior disorders, autism, and intellectual disabilities. It has been shown to be effective for preschool through high school students in both the general education and special education settings. Research outcomes show positive effects on student behaviors and has been used to target following directions: increased engagement, task initiation, transitions between and within tasks, completing tasks from start to finish, and improved academic performance. How can you use behavioral momentum with your students? First, identify what you want the student to do that they can do, but currently are not consistently doing when asked. These are considered low probability or low P requests. Here's Joey. When he comes into the classroom in the mornings, he often wanders around the room and takes a very long time to get to his desk and sit down, even when asked multiple times. Going straight to his
I love
seat
Joey.
when asked,
Go ahead, Joey. Assert yourself.
Next, you will create a list of 3 to 5 requests you have observed the student quickly complies with when asked, approximately 80 to 100% of the time. These are considered high probability or high P requests. We know Joey can hang up his backpack, enjoys getting a morning high five from his teacher, and can perform helper tasks and typically quickly does those things when asked. Now you're ready to use the behavioral momentum strategy. First, give 3 to 5 quick high P requests to your student. Provide verbal praise for completing each request. You might say, "Good morning, Joey. Hang up your backpack and coat. Thanks for hanging that up. Give me a high five. Awesome. Please pass out the whiteboards to your table group. Thanks for helping, Joey." Next, provide the low P request within 10 seconds or less, and again provide verbal praise once the student begins doing what you asked. Go sit in your seat. Great work, Joey. Here's another example for a student whose target behavior is to put away their toys.
Crushing it, Joey. I like Joey. So, I mean, you get it, right? The key is you have to know what's a high P request. What is a truly mastered skill for your student? If it's something where people are standing around going, well, she can do it, she's just not. Is that a high probability request? Nope, that's a low probability request. This takes really good assessment, really thorough assessment of skills, and these have to be very quick things that you're asking for. So even if a student will willingly sit down and do a 30-problem math worksheet, that's not a high probability request because it's not fast enough. This is meant to really get the ball rolling, right? It's momentum. And again, these are all just examples. That whole list of evidence-based practices that had like 35 things on it, we could talk about each one of those. These are just things that we were hoping you could take with you today and just keep in your mind and say, can I build that into my instructional practice, whether I'm a para, a gym teacher, an O&M provider, like how can I build these things in? Because these are effective across the board, not just in the classroom. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. No, Joey. Joey, go sit in your seat. Okay, so this is the big one. This is often a missing piece when we go into classrooms. And the numbers I'm going to talk to you about seem very lofty, but they're not. And I'm going to show you an example. Increasing the opportunities learners have to respond is win-win for so many reasons. More opportunities to respond mean less opportunities to engage in interfering behavior. When we come in and do a behavioral assessment, one of the first things we look at is what's in place in the classroom to support what we call pro-social behavior. What's in place to support really beneficial behavior for that learner, not just for other people. We don't target things that are just annoying for other people. What's going to help that kid do better? And one of the first things we look at is how many opportunities does this child have to respond in any given amount of time? And are they given opportunities to respond in ways that are meaningful at their level instructionally? So if you're given, the right amount of opportunities to respond, but everything's too hard, of course you're going to engage in some kind of interfering behavior, right? If you're given enough opportunities to respond, but everything's too easy for you, of course you're going to engage in interfering behavior. So it's really important to get a good skills assessment happening, and we can help with that. But more opportunities to respond naturally means less opportunities for me to engage in challenging behavior. It also means more opportunities for me to get social reinforcement from the people in my environment. And we only touched on this in the beginning, but everything about behavior change is a change in the external environment, and that includes the behavior of the people in the environment, meaning not the kid. The change of the adult's behavior is what supports behavior change in the child. So the more opportunities you have to respond to something, the more opportunities you have to get social interaction from a grown-up or from a peer if you're working in a group. More opportunities to respond also means more exposure to the content itself, more practice, more data for people to make really good decisions about your learning, which affects your school placement, the type of material you're given, the accommodations you need. So there's really nothing bad about it. There's nothing bad about more opportunities to engage in your learning environment. What's kind of borne out in the research is that about 20%, max 20% of the material that's presented to someone should be new or difficult. So that's something important to look at in your own instructional practice. Am I just giving the kids stuff that's too hard all the time? Really, only 20% of what you're delivering should be new or difficult. That material, the harder stuff, the newer stuff, kids should be given about 4 to 6 opportunities per minute to respond to that material. And you're probably already thinking that's impossible. There's no way with my kids' processing time that I can do that. Well, now I'm going to tell you that familiar and mastered material, which should make up that other 80%, most of the time should be familiar and mastered stuff. Kids should be given 8 to 12 opportunities per minute to respond to that material. We're going to talk about processing time and how that could impact this. But what this is showing you is that your instruction should be weighted toward easy mastered stuff to keep that in the repertoire. Going back to behavioral momentum, you can use this stuff to get the momentum going. 20% should be the new hard stuff. Teacher talk, what I'm doing right now, should make up no more than half of the instructional time. And that includes the I do and the we do. I know I'm mixing it all together right now, but I know you're keeping up with it. So the teacher should only be talking to the child or the group max half the time. The rest of the time should be spent in practice, with modeling, direct one-on-one instruction, things like that. Here's a self-assessment that you are welcome to. I can also send this stuff out to you. This is not just for the classroom teacher, but really anyone working with a child. Are you providing multiple opportunities to respond? Are you using a variety of strategies? Do you have a strategy to track how many opportunities you're giving? Probably not. If you've never talked about this before, you might not be thinking to count these things, but somebody else in your room can count these things for you, or we can come help you. And it's not like a gotcha. Carol and I talked about this a lot. We're in classrooms all day long. We're not in there to like catch people. We're in there to model. It's I do, we do, you do. We're in there to model, take data, be transparent with that data so people know where they're currently functioning instructionally. My first couple years teaching, when somebody took data on me, I was providing like 2 opportunities per minute. And I thought, 8 to 12? What? And then they taught me how to do it. Like somebody has to teach you how to do it, you know? But they were open with me. They showed me my graphs. They showed me my data. And that helped me a lot. So wait time, super important. Here's my caveat. Yes, our kids who have documented needs in terms of sensory processing, processing time, if that's coming from a sound psychological evaluation or some other evaluation, yes, absolutely. We're never going to override that by saying, well, you've got to give him 12 opportunities per minute if his processing time is 20 seconds. That's mathematically impossible. However, sometimes we get into this circular loop of saying, kind of putting the onus on the child and saying, he can't do it because he has slow processing time. I can't provide more opportunities because he has slow processing time. And you see how that becomes kind of like a feedback loop? It almost becomes an out. And unless we know that for sure, we have to presume a level of competence in our learners and a level of competence in ourselves and humility to say, have I taught this child how to respond? For a lot of our kids, it might be really hard to do that. We have to be creative about it and use our team members. Does the child know how to respond to the question you're asking? Do they have a way to do that? If so, good, you can move on to providing a lot of opportunities and see what they can do. If it ends in frustration, then look at, is it too hard? Is it too fast? What's going wrong here? You can kind of parse that out and we can help you do that. But important to be mindful of those things. Do you plan instructional questions and response methods prior to the lesson? So what am I going to teach and how are my kids going to show me that they've learned it? So one example. Okay, this lady is cool. So you're going to see a lot of opportunities to respond. I think she's at 30 per minute. So if you're thinking, how can this be done? You're going to look at her and think, oh, that's just good teaching. So check her out.
This table is ready. This table is ready. Everyone's ready. What do you see to lay on that page?
Here's one.
A girl watering the plants. What do you see, Cheyenne? You see what? Lettuce. What do you see, Carrie? Flowers. Emmanuel, what do you see? A little girl walking around. All right, now let's turn to page 131. Page 130 and 131. Let's look at those words that you see. Words to know. Let's say those words. Places, tiny, brown, crowded, hard, animals, from, beautiful, birds, thirsty. Good job, good job. Everyone was participating. Excellent, good job.
piece of cake. Ish. Right? I mean, an opportunity to respond can literally just be, let's turn the page. You know, hand me your book. So kids don't have to have vocal output to do this. Truly, any chance that they have to respond with their body in some way is sufficient. Okay? I know we only have 5 minutes left. I'm so sorry. We knew this would happen. I'm going to skip ahead to what I think is super important to talk about. Oh, good Lord. Ugh, keep doing this. Okay. So you saw antecedent interventions, right? We talked about antecedent means before. So antecedent interventions are things you have in place in the environment, whatever environment you're in, to prevent the occurrence of interfering behavior by setting up something stable. Something stable, we can extend that to mean something meaningful, something joyful. Antecedent interventions are evidence-based practices, and we want our environment to be led by the learner. There's a lot to talk about on this. Again, this was multiple days in the summer. We're trying to consolidate it. We want to notice what our kids notice, set safe boundaries, share in their joy. That's not like a cheesy phrase. Like, we want to identify what joy looks like for that learner and get in there with them. Acknowledge their needs, respect their opinions, empower them. In our classrooms, but I would maintain in every classroom, should be what we call universal protocols. And these are basically our ground rules for how we're going to interact with our kids. It makes interfering behavior a lot less likely. It increases staff engagement. It increases student engagement. I'm just going to show you the list. But if you leave here with nothing else, if you can just pick 1 or 2 of these, if you can pick all of them, that's great. But if you can pick anything from this list that you don't already do and take it with you, that could be a game changer for your kids. So when you know nothing else about what to do, let's say you have a new kid, you're pulled, you're subbing in another class, your kid is having a really hard time, show continuous positive regard and empathy. That just means be nice, which we all hopefully are in this field because we know how to do that. But continuous positive regard means no matter what the student is doing, I am showing up for them. I'm empathizing. I say, I hear you. This is hard. Gone are the days of blatantly ignoring challenging behavior, AKA the entire human being. It's okay to say, I hear you. This is hard. If the kid has a behavior plan, we will teach you how to run that behavior plan. But if these things aren't in the behavior plan, that's a really important question for you to ask your behavior analyst. Hey, I noticed some of the universal protocols that LB told me about. No, we're all on the same page with this, but we enrich the environment. We make it fun to be there. We follow their lead to the greatest extent possible. We invite the learner to participate, but we don't force the learner to participate. We limit non-essential demands. Compliance is a life skill in certain situations. If you're running into the street and someone says stop, your compliance in that situation is, we want 100% compliance, right? When it comes to doing a math worksheet you don't feel like doing, that might be a little bit different. Maybe I teach you some toleration. Maybe I teach you to ask for a different worksheet. Maybe I teach you to ask for a break, right? One thing that's really hard for people at first, but I know some of you who worked with our kids, you've seen this in behavior plans, is that sometimes we actually do reinforce lower levels of interfering behavior if it avoids escalation to a dangerous level. And that's alongside a lot of other stuff, a lot of instruction, but you'll see this a lot in our classrooms where there is a safety risk in play. We might go ahead and reinforce lower level SIB or aggression in favor of teaching, getting another teaching trial, having another opportunity to teach. When we need to, we just return to these. It's always okay to back off. We prioritize safety. We call it dignity, televisability, and rapport. Dignity for our kids and staff. Televisability means at any point someone should be able to walk in and broadcast you on the evening news, and you should not only be okay with it, but really proud of what you're doing and what your colleagues are doing, and rapport with that student. It's okay to put aside demands if you need to rebuild that relationship. And this is contemporary behavior analysis, and we talk a lot about this in our program, but I did want to kind of get this part in because in terms of engagement, if these things aren't in place, you're just going to be fighting all day, and we don't want that for anybody. Yeah. All right. Just gonna. All right, so I really wanted to talk to you about Ascent. Some of you have heard me talk about that before. Would love to talk to you about it. Come by and see me and Carol. Being able to recognize Ascent and Ascent withdrawal from your learners, super important. We could spend days on that. But to wrap up, we have some review questions, but really what I would like to hear from is what feedback do you have from today, or are there any burning questions you have from today?
Mr. Junior, yeah.
The one over here.
What?
What does asset mean?
Good question. Assent, yeah. Assent is consent for anyone who's under 18 or not able to legally provide consent. So that could also be an adult with a disability. Yeah. So we build assent-based programming, meaning we want people to opt in or buy into what we're doing with them and give them a choice of whether to participate or not. Great question.
Guys, one other thing I just want to mention to you, when you do leave for the exit, the post questions, please make sure you are doing the post questions in the same format or venue that you did your pre-questions. So just make sure so if you logged in through Paylocity or whatever the other options were, I'm not